Yo, what is going on, everybody? NGS back again for another video on this godforsaken Netflix Death Note movie. I just can't freaking escape it, man. I mean, I thought one was enough. I'm usually a one and done type of dude. That's what she said. But for this particular video, the more and more I read the comments section, the more I see a lot of, I don't want to necessarily say dangerous opinions, but there's something that really make me feel nostalgic because I remember these same comments, very, very similar comments from the year 2009 when a little film called Dragon Ball Evolution came out. And we're going to be addressing some of these comments that the individuals have laid towards in defense of the Netflix Death Note movie. In order to do that, I needed to bring some backup with me. I am bringing on one of the spearheads for the Dragon Ball Evolution protest. Yes, we are taking it way back, ladies and gentlemen. I introduce to you today my good friend from Wisconsin, the one, the only, Danny D's World. What is going on, brother man? How have you been?
I've been okay. I've actually got a few topics in mind that I'm going to be tackling myself fairly soon, so that's been fun to plan out. Well, not so much. Not so much. Typically, whenever I do a video, it's because I'm going to complain about something.
well, isn't that what we're doing with this movie, Danny? Isn't that all we're doing? We're not enjoying it. We're just trying to take all the fun out of it.
Well, yeah. I mean,
let's go.
I'll freely admit it. No, well, I mean, it's less trying to take the fun out of things, and it's more basically simply having standards. I mean, lack of standards will see nothing but degradation. I mean, here's an example of what happens when you don't hold someone to standards. Michael Bay's first Transformers movie. Decent enough movie. Could have done stuff with it in the future, could have evolved it, could have elevated it, etc. Instead, what happened? Transformers Revenge of the Fallen came out, and even though it sucked, we all went to see it. And then Transformers Dark of the Moon came out, and even though it sucked a little bit less, it still kind of sucked, but we all went to see it. And then Age of Extinction came out, and even though we knew that was going to suck, we all went to see it. And so on. And things haven't gotten any better. They've all gotten worse as time has gone on. When you don't hold people to specific standards, things do get worse. And it's not just necessarily worse for that property in general. It can actually be worse for the entire genre, as it were, an entire subset. I mean, we let him get away with Transformers for so long, and then he decided he was going to tackle Ninja Turtles too. Look what happened there.
Right.
You know? So just both for the sake of I can't even say that I'm doing this as a fan, because honestly, I am not a fan of Death Note. Like I wouldn't even call myself necessarily a casual fan. I'm more of an observer. I can appreciate what it tried to do in terms of storytelling and characterization. I just personally think it probably could have been executed a little bit better, even in the anime, the manga. But that's my opinion, and I'm not going to knock you for liking that. But I mean, I have to put that disclaimer out there because, every time I say I don't like something, suddenly I think it's terrible.
Oh, it's like the second you say, I wasn't really feeling that, it's like you think it's Satan's spawn or something. But that's the reason why I actually wanted to bring you onto this, because we have very different visions and opinions on the Death Note story. And, unlike most people out there who, whenever they try to gang up on a movie, they bring all their friends who think this movie sucks. I actually wanted to bring you on here because you have a complete polar opposite viewpoint on me when it comes to Death Note. You actually do not have a dog in this fight when it comes to the movie.
No, I don't. I was mostly indifferent when it was announced, and I stayed mostly indifferent until trailers started coming out, and I started seeing what they were doing, and I started hearing what the director was saying, and I literally facepalmed. So,
yeah, as we all did. But yeah, the reason why I wanted to bring you on here is because I mentioned earlier this whole situation. situation with the Death Note movie is very similar to Dragon Ball Evolution, at least the response to it. And this is something that I think a lot of people in here in the room, I got a lot of flack in particular for even fathoming to compare this to Dragon Ball Evolution. But what I think a lot of people don't realize, or maybe they're ignorant to, is that they weren't around during the Dragon Ball Evolution days. For them to say that there weren't people damage controlling for that movie is completely asinine. Wouldn't you agree as a person who spearheaded the protest?
Well, I just to correct the record a little bit, I wouldn't say I spearheaded it. I did join it. I did kind of boost it a little bit, but several other people did too at around that time. But while I was there, and from before the time I wound up a moderator to before I wound up actually kind of running the thing to even after, we had to deal with so many people, like sending in hate videos, people who were making I remember this one guy, like, even did he told this like crazy story about how he was in a dance competition, and he won this dance competition. And then he was like, afterwards he was like, hey, if you guys, thanks for coming out to support me. You should all go see this Dragon Ball Evolution movie. And he insisted that half the people in there went out there and bought tickets right away. Like, there were people damage controlling on this level, on the level of, everybody clapped stories here.
Like standing ovation type stuff?
Yeah. I punched the rapist and the whole bus clapped.
Ah, Jesus.
Even though this guy was literally raping me and the police weren't even doing anything about it. So I stood up and punched him and everyone clapped. That kind of stuff. Thank you, Jeb. But yeah, they had like entire channels dedicated to supporting that movie. They were doing the same thing we were doing, like aggregating positive reviews of the thing instead of negative. They were covering sequel news and trying to put a positive spin on it. Anything they could find to put out there. They were gloating about how the sequel had already been greenlit. How they clung on to that fake James Marsters interview where he claimed that he could now finally say that they were beginning work on the sequel.
Yo, it's still coming out. What you talking about?
Oh yeah, 2020 gonna be great.
Yo, Dragon Ball for a new fucking decade.
I remember one. There was at least one person who said, "What if they're like being really meta and they're actually gonna have the Dragon Ball Z movie take place 5 years after the Dragon Ball movie?" And I was like, "Oh my god." It's actually going to come out 5 years later, and then, like 2014 rolled around and nothing. So there's still people, by the way, who want that to happen. Oh, there's still people who want that sequel to happen. But we're getting off track here. But the point is, yes, it had some very rabid defenders back in that day. And honestly, the way things are now versus the way things are then, it almost feels like we've kind of come full circle. In fact, things might actually be worse now because now it's actually become the popular stance to basically blindly defend something and the unpopular stance to be critical. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's indicative of how far standards have fallen or what, but I do think that if Dragon Ball Evolution had come out today, that it probably would not have flopped. It would have been a financial success, and we probably would be drowning in terrible sequels, all produced by Michael Bay. So I mean, it was his production company that helped fund it, wasn't it? No, that was Brett Ratner.
That's Brett Ratner, bro. Brett Ratner,
yeah. That's a whole new rabbit hole. We ain't even going to go down that rabbit hole, though.
No, sir.
But yeah, I mean, the idea of that really scares me, and that is something that I would very much like to avoid, which is why I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. So when I say that this movie and this whole post-release, this whole fandom defense for this film, why it just feels so familiar to me is because I lived through it. I know people who lived through it and they've seen these sort of comments. And this isn't coming from a place of me just trying to say this is the worst thing ever because I'm such a big fanboy. No, this is coming from a place of if we are going to such great lengths to damage control for a movie by saying such asinine statements such as, if you've never made a movie before in your life, then you cannot criticize something, and well, if you think you're so good at it, why don't you do it yourself? I thought to myself, you know what? Instead of writing essays, instead of critiquing the shit out of the comments, I wanted to do something better. I wanted to bring this man Danny on here for the both of us to not only create our ideal adaptation for Netflix's Death Note, but we're going to do y'all one better, because you like to keep throwing out this card that, oh, what would you have done in 90 minutes? What would you have done in 90 minutes? What we're going to attempt to do is fix this 90-minute Death Note movie. Take what they were doing, what they were going for, and make it work. That portion was Danny's idea. So if anything, Danny, I want to open the floor up to you. Now, based on the movie and what they were going for, there's this common thing going around, this common defense, more or less, that this movie is supposed to be different. And the fact that it was different, and they admitted it was going to be different, you cannot critique it from an adaptation standpoint.
Well, frankly, that's simply not true. Simply because there have been cases where something has been adapted from another property, and while not being a beat-for-beat adaptation, or even necessarily pertaining to the same characters of said adaptation, has actually, or said source has, been a successful adaptation in that it maintained the spirit of what they were trying to do, it maintained the theme of what they were trying to do, it conveyed a similar message to what they were trying to convey. Sometimes, in some cases, it's actually been done even better. Notable examples of movies that have, actually kind of strayed fairly far from their source material, yet still been, entertaining in their own right, and still more or less got similar points across. One of the more notable ones is probably, let's see here. The original Blade film was one. That was honestly a very good movie, but very different from its comic source. Another one would be, honestly, probably the best, most current example would be Captain America Civil War, in which case they very heavily did deviate from the Civil War comic, and then, they managed to have a really good, really strong adaptation that did touch on the same themes from the comic, but honestly touched on them far better. So to say that you can't have an adaptation or call it an adaptation when they're trying to do something different is simply not true. Now, to that effect, when it comes to the Netflix Death Note movie, one thing that they very easily could have done, very simple to do, very easy to do, would not have been hard, would simply be to ditch all pretense. All right, and here's what I mean by that. They said from the get-go that this is not going to be a straight Death Note adaptation. This is not going to be beat for beat from the anime or the manga. This is going to be its own thing. We are doing an American version of it, was how they tried to sell it, which first and foremost is kind of dumb. But trying to sell it as an American version of something is like, what makes it, uniquely American? And that's the thing. Nothing about it made it uniquely American. It didn't really take too much into effect regarding our society. It didn't, because here's why. They tried too hard. They got scared. They tried too hard to cling to the source, while all the time claiming that they were not trying to cling to the source. And what I mean by that is the incessant need to keep everything the same. You have a main character. He's supposed to be your Light Yagami, but you say right off the bat he's going to be nothing like Light Yagami. But you still want to get them butts in the seats, or in this case, you still want to get them clicks. You want the fans to click. You need something familiar to draw them in, because you're doing a terrible job selling this on your own. So what do? You keep the name, but just change the last one. So out of nowhere, we have Light Turner. We still have Light Turner. We still have L. We still have Mia, which is a not very clever alteration of Misa. We have, and we straight up have Ryuk, and talking to Light. I mean, you knew what they were going for there. It's very clear what they're trying to evoke here, while all the time trying to claim, oh, we're not trying to do that. It does not hold up.
And especially considering, and this is where I draw the line, and this is where I honestly am convinced that they really haven't read too much into the series, because in the very first episode of the anime, in the first chapter of the manga, Ryuk even says to Light that this is not the first time a Death Note has been dropped in this world. So wouldn't the smart thing to do, if they did not want to do a beat for beat adaptation because they felt it would be way too similar, wouldn't the smart thing to do be create all new characters and just keep the Death Note and a Shinigami the similar concepts?
Easily. And here's the thing, especially if this is a half hour long or an hour and a half long, 90-minute thing. Mm-hmm. Like, even if you couldn't stretch it to like 2 hours and you can only do like 90 minutes, you could easily do a number of things with a 90-minute Death Note film, while, you know, taking from the spirit of the series and yet making it completely its own thing.
Right.
First and foremost, if they had done what they did there, like, everything in the movie stayed the same. Just, you know, ditch the pretense of trying to keep all the different names together. Mm-hmm. You could at least say that, you know, we're kind of, you know, alluding to it. You could kind of make these things out to be like Easter eggs without trying to be these characters. Like, if you had, you know, L be like someone else, you know, just like a completely different persona, but he had like a couple of the same tics as L, or just, you know, you knew that he had same role, you know, even just the same role would be sufficient to kind of create a parallel, which shows that you're kind of following the story, but, you know, you're still doing your own thing. But when they do call him L, they do have him sit exactly the same. They do have that candy obsession. They do, you know, then it becomes very clear that they're trying way too hard to stick to, you know, manga L, which then falls apart later on because, you know, he very much becomes not manga L, which could have worked for an original character, but does not work for L. Mm-hmm. So just digital pretense, you know, don't have Light Turner, have shoot, I don't know, Jack Turner, have you know, different people. Set it in the same universe, you know. You can even try to spin it as a sequel. You know, I mean, he said Death has been dropped before. Why not have it with, you know, this after the whole Light Yagami thing? Why not? Or even have it as a prequel.
What's very funny about that is Japan actually came out with a movie that is, I think, like a sequel set a certain amount of time after the original Death Note story. And I don't know how well that was. But again, they're going down that route because they don't feel the need to go ahead and try to continue the story directly with the characters or try to do something crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, so long as you try to do something different and it still feels like the source material, that's the best part about it. And it's so easy with Death Note because there are limitless possibilities, considering all you need to have are two things: the Death Note and the Shinigami. And then from there, you can craft your own stories. And in some cases, believe it or not, folks, maybe a Death Note story doesn't have to be this crazy police procedural drama and this crazy cat and mouse game with Light and L. Maybe Adam Wingard could have made his horror series with the Death Note as the constant. Maybe, but it's not. That's not what we got.
Well, there are so many things you could do with it. I mean, the easy way out, obviously, is to say, you know, Netflix series and.
Right.
And I know that they wouldn't have probably greenlit that just because they would have been nervous about it. But, you know, on the other hand, even if you're just doing a movie, like I said, set it in the same universe. You can also actually do like some of the older movies, like the Tales from the Dark Side movie, or the original Tales from the Crypt movie, or you know, any number of done an anthology film, like 3 different stories about 3 different people who were given the Death Note by Ryuk. Have him be the connecting factor. Have him in the Death Note the connecting factor. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you could have done short stories like that, and then you wouldn't have to worry about the plot getting too intricate. You wouldn't have to worry about things, you know, getting out of control writing-wise. You wouldn't have to try to stretch your story out across, you know, this when, you know, you want to break it up and, you know, put it in little segments here. You can do that. You can just tell different stories with different characters. Have an anthology film. Or like I said, you can just completely make it its own thing, make it its own film, set it up, spin it, pitch it as a sequel or a prequel or something, something that just maybe not even necessarily in the same universe per se. I mean, Ryuk's a Shinigami. He's a death god. I mean, presumably that, multiple dimensions, universes, what have it, you name it, they could screw around with whatever. And so long as it stayed within the, the spirit of what it is, what the Death Note is, cautionary tales of what happens when you get hold of that power. What if somebody was strong enough to have rejected that power? Would they be willing to deal with the consequences that would come with giving that up? What would happen if somebody was caught using it? And all that is stuff that too is actually examined at different points in the series plot itself. Well, not all of it, but some of it. I mean, like, look what happens at the end of this. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert for a long done series, but at the end of the manga, when Light does get caught, do something based on that. Only, just don't have him conveniently die there. Just have him, get sent to prison. And then, you could even do like an almost courtroom drama thing, because it's like, hey, you caught this serial killer. Prove how he's killing everyone with a book.
Mm-hmm.
You could do something like that. And then as the police investigate and they find out more about this stuff, and, Ryuk gets involved and the Death Note gets involved, maybe they're tempted by it. I mean, just if you're a prosecutor and you've seen so many criminals that are guilty walk because of technicalities or lack of evidence, or, just the officer forgot to read them their rights before arresting them, you would be tempted to maybe pick up that book and start doing it yourself. If you even came to believe in that, or what if you think you're just going crazy? There's so many possibilities you could do in a world like this with something like a Death Note and everything it represents, and Ryuk just baiting everybody along for his own amusement.
Mm-hmm.
And they punted it, really. They tried to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to do their own thing, and yet they wanted to try to cling to the original to get the fans to sit down and get suckered into it. And I don't think that works.
No, you're exactly right. And it's a shame, really, because it's like endless possibilities. And it's actually kind of disappointing, considering, like, we all know the story of Death Note. Yes, we've seen it done in anime. We've seen it done, of course, in the original manga. We've seen it done in Japanese movies. We've seen it done in Japanese dramas. And I think there's a Korean musical as well. So why don't... Yeah, I seriously don't know how that works. But yeah, it's a thing. Look at that. But again, it's a sign that all you need is a little ingenuity, and you could do something different. You could do something interesting. And it definitely goes against this notion that we've been seeing. Like, they needed to dumb this movie down in order to sell it over here in America. I wholeheartedly reject that.
What they needed to do was stick to casting Zac Efron and just adapt that Korean musical.
Oh, my God. That, I ain't gonna front. I would pay to see that. I would pay to get freaking orchestra seats for that, man. Shoot.
Yeah. Light Yagami dancing around singing Bet on It with Ryuk doing backup.
Are you telling me that doesn't sound like the most fabulous thing in the world? Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't think I'm ever going to see anything more fabulous than Ryuk doing that pen, pineapple, apple, pen dance.
Oh, Jesus. Why you got to bring that back?
Because
well, it is topical, though. It is very topical. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Right then and there, in the span of like 10 minutes, we were able to break down what you needed to do for an American adaptation of Death Note. And it wasn't really that hard. I mean, if you wanted to just take the stuff that they did in the movie, if you wanted to take these characters, all you need to do is tweak them a little bit, change the motivations up a bit, give some of them motivations, fix the pacing, fix so much in the movie.
Well, I mean, really, if you want to do a successful adaptation, even just in the spirit of things, first thing you got to do is, and it's really simple, just break it down to its most basic elements. You got to figure out, what is this series? What is the point of this series? What is the meaning behind it? What does this signify? You want to adapt a character, but you can't do it directly. Find out what their core traits are. What does this character represent? How can we represent that in our own way, or is there a way we can bring that to this? It's really simple. And when I say it's core elements, I do mean like the message and everything, not like, let's break down each character. This is L. He sits funny. He likes candy. He's really smart. That's not how you do it. You figure out, what is the dynamic between L and Light? How do we adapt that into these two characters that we want to do here? What is the point and the message behind Death Note? What is the story? And you find ways to transfer that. You don't just take superficial bits and pieces, window dressing, and stick it on something. That is not how you adapt things. That is how Hollywood, however, does way too often try to adapt things. And that's why so many of them just fall flat.
And
but when you sit there and you actually...
Unfortunately, part of the reason why so many people see them, because they see those things.
But if you really care and you really dig down and you just have a basic understanding of what you're dealing with, you can do a great job with it.
Well said, my friend. Well said. You're always just very well spoken, Danny. Very eloquent. You always nail the something on the head. I don't know where I was going with that, but good job, my friend. Good job. I applaud you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to take this opportunity to pimp my Dragon Ball script I wrote at one time.
Oh, snap. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. This man, Danny, has got a script for Dragon Ball in the works. I remember hearing about this like 3 years ago.
I had one. I actually had the plot written up. I had some dialogue written up. It was adapting the 23rd Budokai, or was it 27th? It was whichever one TN showed up at. I'm too tired to think of the exact number right now. But it was basically the whole TN arc there, and adapting that and finding ways to introduce characters and introduce them fresh while still referencing stuff that had already happened and yada yada. But that's neither here nor there. I could reminisce. I'm sorry. I could reminisce about that for hours.
Sir, you know what you got to do now. You've already baited the people. You need to make this a priority for your upcoming videos, man.
Well, I mean, I suppose I could try.
I'm just saying, man. Keep that stuff topical. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this video and listening all throughout almost half an hour. I want to thank you once again, Danny, for coming and joining me on this adventure and discussing what went wrong with Death Note and how we could have saved it. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it, especially considering, like I said, you don't have a dog in this fight.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure.
All right. And from me to you for now, my name is NGS signing out, and like always, I will catch you guys later. Peace.